Hey, we're live. Awesome. So, welcome to the Saturday morning edition of Big Data, Big Questions, the live session. So, today I've got some big news that I wanted to talk about that was kind of in the news this week. One being the Databricks announcement. Hey, how was it going, man? How is today treating you, man? Let me know what project you're working on as well there in the comment section below. Or chat session. I get confused about what it is. But the first article that I'm going to go through is the Databricks announcement. So if you're familiar with that, let's have a discussion in the chat session about that. I'm doing pretty good. So about the Databricks announcement this week or with their evaluation. I thought it was huge news for the data ecosystem, and some points out of that article that I really wanted to kind of hit on that I didn't really realize. So I didn't understand how big the Databricks organization was, with their unified platform. So if you're not familiar with Databricks, main contributors to Spark, and they just got a $250 million Series E investment, that's pretty huge. And I think Series E, I don't know a lot about startup culture, but Series E, as you go down, that's pretty far down. So they're baked in for a full solution, but they were given a $2.75 billion valuation. So I thought that was huge. I didn't realize that they had that much reach. And then also, like, one of the key points too, they have 2,000 customers worldwide. So pretty crazy, man. Yeah, so they are providing some training. I've recommended some of their courses just from what I've heard. I haven't been through any of their courses of their certification, but definitely if you're in the Spark world, I mean, that is where you can go to get some of the Spark training. So there's still others offered out there by Amazon, Azure. There's a big reference to Azure in this article if you're watching this. But with what they're doing with the Azure platform and Databricks and how they're kind of merging those. But I think from what I've heard from a lot of enterprises is they actually send their people through the Databricks certification, whether it's on-site, and I think they offer some remote training too for that certification. So I thought that was huge. And then so they were talking about the investment that they were going to make with the $250 million they have. Part of it was, bringing out a sales force, and then also doubling down on some of their production with ML Flow and Delta. So I'm not familiar with those, but the article stated that those are some of their life cycle production products. So I'm pretty interested now. You definitely got my attention. So I'm gonna start looking at some more information around Databricks and kind of their certification. So I think it's it's one of those things we can't overlook. But if you've been following this channel, that's one of the things we've been talking about a good bit is like, okay, in 2019. We're going to see a shift, and we're going to see, a doubling down on more platforms and more things going on in the data engineering community. So really cool to see that. Really cool to see that my sound is good in the comment section here below, or the chat session. Man, I've got to get out of say comment section is when I'm recording these videos. Whatever. And then the next article that I wanted to share before I jump into answering. So if you have any questions this week, make sure you put them in the chat session, and I will do my best to answer those. We'll go through some of the community posts that I've gotten this week as well to answer some questions live here on Big Data Big Questions. So this article, let me go back and look at the date on it. So I believe, yeah. So it's actually came out in December 2018. So it's not that old, but man, it references a study done by IDC, and I think it was in collaboration with some others, but specifically around IDC. And it's just about the storage and data predictions for 2025. So some of the key points that I really pulled out of the article that I was excited about. So I was prepping for a presentation I have to give next week. But they were saying, that right now, globally, what we have is 33 zettabytes of data. And then they're predicting, so just in the next 6 years, we're predicted to go to 175 zettabytes. And so 175 zettabytes is crazy, but like, really, what is a zettabyte? So if you're not familiar with a zettabyte, I kind of looked it up. So I knew that there was a zettabytes and then exabytes, and then it goes to petabytes, which I'm really familiar with on the petabyte scale. But exabytes, think of it as well, yeah. So exabytes are next up. So a zettabyte is 1,000 exabytes, which is 1,000,000 petabytes. So we're saying 175 zettabytes. So we're talking, what is that, 175 million petabytes? I don't know if I'm doing my math right here, but think about it. Just 1 zettabyte is a billion terabytes. So, or a trillion gigabytes. So that's a ton of data to be analyzed. So, just the data growth. So what we're generating from IoT and kind of everything that's going on from that perspective is going to be huge. But I mean, we're still going to hold on to the data too. Um, Another key point, this ties into what we were just talking about. Nearly 30% of that data that's generated is going to be consumed in real time. So when we talk about, you've heard me talk about on this channel, the difference between streaming and batch processing and kind of how, Spark changed the paradigm and how, real time for this year, we were just talking about last week, real time is going to be a big emphasis with IoT and everything that's going on. So we're seeing a good bit. So I'm going to jump into some questions. If you want to comment on any of the articles that we were talking about, make sure you check those out. I thought those were real good. I actually sent them out in an update this week to some folks. But let's jump in. So, hello, sir. I'm creating a Hadoop cluster on AWS that is showing no instance found matching your filter criteria. So, do you have the cluster running? So I'm going to need a little more context around what's going on from that perspective. But if you have the cluster, if you have the cluster running, have you been able to go through the hello world or even just get a pig script running or something like that? Or is it a network connection kind of issue? So if the cluster's up and running, but then you're not able to query, like if you're doing a Hive job or doing some kind of pig or even a Spark position, those are two different ways. But the first thing, one of the hardest things, no matter if you're setting it up on AWS or on your own home lab environment, is getting the networking sometimes. So that's going to be my default answer for when you start it out. But give me some more context, and I can try to help you out. Or you can always let me see, send you a link here. But you can always send me an email with some screenshots if you want to big questions. So that's an email. So yeah, it's running. After you stop and start, you get the above error. So have you been able to run like a quick hello world, or I know whenever I go through it on the Hortonworks side, like it comes installed where you can just run a simple MapReduce job for some kind of what is it? Some kind of just word count. So I've got a couple examples too. If you're needing some scripts, if you look in my pig eval series on my website, if you can get one of those running, then we can kind of troubleshoot it backwards from that perspective. But you're saying it is running, so at least it's not a network issue. It's good. I'm going to go through some of the community questions. Feel free to continue to elaborate on that or send me the question directly, and I'll do my best to try to help. Let me see here. Let's pull up the community site on YouTube. So I want to thank everybody that's on right now and watching later on for continuing to help this channel grow and participating in the live sessions that we have here and just all the videos that we continue to churn out. So this week I just churned out a video that came in from one of the comments on YouTube around data engineering in 2019. So it says how to start. So one of the first comments I got, I'm just going to go from top to bottom. So one of the first comments I got yesterday was, how do I start as a data engineer? I'm very confused. Help me get through it. So I've made quite a few videos. I'm going to respond by putting those in. But if you're watching this right now, it's going to depend on where you're starting out. So just like the questions that we're answering here, starting up your own home lab environment, depending on where you are from a career perspective. So if you're in a career and you're wanting to go into a different organization, some of it's going to be about soft skills and just communicating and talking to those other groups and say, hey, what's your development stack? I'd like to join your team. I'm going to do some of my own personal education, just put it on you because those are the things that you can control. But if they're using Hortonworks or Cloudera, man, you can spin that up in your own local environment. If you're using AWS or Azure, open an account. A lot of the stuff you can do, keeping it under the free tier or keeping it, $10 or $20, a month, which is a heck of an investment, right? For when we talk about what, data engineering salary roles are or data scientist roles are. So, and those are huge roles. So just depending on where you're starting, you can always start by just getting in and getting hands-on. So I've got plenty of resources out there from a Pluralsight perspective, but there's tons of stuff on YouTube. I mean, this is part of what this channel is teaching people how to get started. So, and answering questions. So one question is Spark only compatible with Python 2.7? So Python 3.7 doesn't work. I'm gonna have to cheat and look up the documentation on that one. I will say last time I ran it, I think it was in the 2.7 arena, but let's see what we got here. Documentation. So let's see what we got in 2.4. So it's saying that it will not go to 3.7. So if you've watched any of my Pluralsight courses, like the first thing I always do in the first module is show the documentation, because things will change and you want to know where it is. So any new features or anything like that. But specifically to answer your question, if you're looking at that, looking on the fourth line, but it's saying that the newest version will run in Java 8.0 and above, which we're not asking about that, but it's saying Python 2.7 all the way up to 3.4. So, and then R, it's doing 3.1. So you can see there the documentation for it. So note support for, if you're running 2.6, which you didn't ask about, but we'll just talk about it a little bit. So it says if you're running 2.6, then you have to go to a different version of Spark. So the newest version of Spark, you should be able to get above 2.7, but I'm not sure. I saw in the Databricks that they all have Spark related in courses for Python 2.7. Yeah, it's one of those things, right? Like, as from a training perspective and kind of when you roll out, the newest version is probably not going to be in the training. So is there a specific reason that you're looking? Is it just trying to install it in your own environment, or why, I guess why are you concerned about trying to go to the newest version of Python on Spark? And because from my perspective, I don't think there's a ton of changes that are going to prevent you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think you're going to get behind if, like, hey, you're going through the course right now, or you're going through, get your certification and it's on 2.7, and if you're on a different version of Python, I don't think that that's going to be such a huge deal, or it's going to prevent you from learning anything. And some of the changes may be nuanced. Now, I will say it be a little bit different, right, when we're talking about different versions of Spark. But from a language perspective in Python, I don't know that I would be concerned, I guess, about that. Now, you don't want to be behind, right? But I don't think this is something that's going to put you behind. So I hope that answered your question. If you have any more, definitely reach out. So, okay. And then somebody commented one of the things saying that they were the first viewer. So that's pretty awesome, for the first viewer and the first comment. So excited to see that, excited to see the interaction. All right, here we go. So 3 days ago, I had another question. So the main problem with Hadoop is it's not optimized to handle iterative data processing. The HDFS system becomes overburdened with constant accesses as output to reduce becomes input to the map over and over until the final convergence takes place. Also, the data processing is acyclical, and you cannot interact with the stage processing, even though you can do iterative processing. Hadoop is not very efficient, hence Spark. Oh, man, that's okay. So this was on my Spark and Hadoop. So what's the difference between Spark and Hadoop? And so this person was just kind of elaborating, just saying, hey, this is what's going on from a Hadoop perspective. And so in that video, I was really trying to mainly break down batch and real time, and kind of, why Spark is such a big popular thing, but also kind of put Hadoop in a box where it's like, hey, break Hadoop up into two different layers, right? What we traditionally talked about with MapReduce versus what we talk about from the perspective of, like HDFS, and even you hear me say it all the time on here, the Hadoop ecosystem. Like, I even put Spark in there. So, but no, that was a great comment. They're just breaking down the differences between the processing, right? The processing between MapReduce, which is a batch-oriented process, where Spark is more real-time. I know, don't beat me up and tell me that it's just micro batch. I get it, but Spark streaming and some other things have kind of breaking out. We've kind of overcome some of that in the last few years. So great comment there. See, is there any beginner projects that I can do All right. Is there any beginner projects that one can do to show a potential to an employer that they are passionate and knowledgeable about in data engineering? Absolutely. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. That's what, you can see them in the comment section here below, or I'm sorry, the chat session here. Man, I'm never going to get out of that. The chat session here where people are talking about some of the projects that they're working on the side. It's something, I've done and I continually do, right? Like, so, I actually just did an interview for a podcast that should be coming out in the next couple of weeks around what I've done for deep learning, and all that's, for the most part, it's been, something that I was just kind of getting ahead, for my job and kind of looking at what's going on from a TensorFlow and a TF-Learn perspective too. So, back directly to your question. So I've got a video out there on the projects. I'm not going to post that in here below, but I will post out some ideas here. So let's see. I'm just going to put this here, but I've got a ton of different projects just to kind of get started and show. Most of these are all using like the Hortonworks sandbox, the Cloudera sandbox. But the thing is like you don't have to do that. Like if you're using AWS or Azure, you should be able to make and convert some of those changes. This is an example just with Pig, but I'm just saying like, hey, these are some examples of some things that you can do to get started. And another thing that I would recommend doing, and maybe I'm going to make a video and for sure a blog post around this for data engineers, is, man, set up your own website, set up your own YouTube channel or Twitch, or just or even LinkedIn. Like if you're using LinkedIn, especially like if you're trying to do and build your brand for your next career move, or maybe you're in college and you want to be able to do it, you can write blog posts and kind of go through some of this stuff too. So take some of these examples that you see here and kind of make them, use those as ideas to spur. Like I'm not saying like, there's no copyright on mine or anything like that. But if you want to, they're very simple examples to kind of get you started. And if you want to expand upon those, make sure you document it somewhere, right? Like write a blog post for it, set up your own blog. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably like, oh man, I don't have enough content. Like make it your learning thing. I mean, that's how we started with this channel here is, I just started talking about some of the things that I was learning or some of the questions that I've been getting. Did the same thing on blog posts, so as I was going through the community and learning things, I just, started making, fun little projects and started talking about them, and, it continued to help out. And so now, I've got a ton of blog posts that, if I was looking for a position or wanted to show, potential employers or even internally, like you can turn around and say, hey, these are some of the projects that I've worked on. This is, a podcast that I started, or this is a podcast that, I was interviewed on, or this is a YouTube video where I show, hey, some of the differences between Python 2.7 and 3.7 once that becomes available, right? I mean, that's an opportunity for you to show here, like, hey, in the documentation for Databricks and a lot of their projects, they're all done here in, 2.7, but go ahead and go up to 3.4 and see if you can get the code to work and get some of those examples. And you can write a blog post or shoot a video. How important is knowledge in data structures and algorithms for data engineer? Oh man, I think that's another. I think that's the exact. Benjamin, thank you for asking that again. I was going to get to it, I promise. But yeah, so I've done a video before talking about algorithms, and I've done a video before talking about how important algorithms are for data engineers to know. And I will say, like, the old software answer is going to depend, but for the most part, you need to be familiar with the algorithms, but just kind of from a higher level, right? You want to be able to implement them. Like so the first line of defense is for you to understand how to implement those, right? Like, I started out using my how. So I knew how to implement what we were trying to do, what the data scientists wanted to be able to implement from. We were using singular value decomposition and then a PCI function inside of it. Sounds really complex, but it was all in the documentation for my how. What was good for me is like, hey, it's on Thomas to get the code working, right? Like I had to get the code working and prove that we could run that algorithm. Now the data scientists, what they were doing was they were deciding, how many different passes, how many different iterations we were going to do, because something with PCI, it's pretty complex. It just takes a whole bunch of averages and you kind of plot those out. But I was more responsible for that side. We were a fairly small team. So I probably had to be a little more familiar with the algorithms than if you're on a big team than you would be. But yeah, I wouldn't so much worry about that from the algorithms perspective. Now, the data structure perspective, that's a little bit different. And maybe I'm answering this question wrong, but I'm assuming you're talking about, hey, you've got this unstructured data that lives in HDFS or lives in S3 or lives, on an NFS mount somewhere, right? Um, and you need to be able to pull that into, have it in a digestible way for your data scientist, whether they're using Tableau or whether they're using some of their own kind of tools. You want to put it in a structure because maybe they don't have the scripting skills to do that, or maybe it's just part of your job. I kind of put that in the bucket of ETL, and that's very important, right? But that's a lot of fun to me. I know it sounds like abusive to love ETL because so many people hate it, but I mean it's a love hate relationship because sometimes you can just solve things in 4 or 5 lines of script and just makes you feel happy, right? So that's something that you can practice, and that's something you can kind of go through is just transforming. Classic example that you can find anywhere out there in tutorials is you take in Twitter data and try to put it in a structure, right? So things like that. So I hope I answered your question. If not, man, just ping me again here in the chat session, and we can expand on anything. But I think data structures are important, and understanding how to transform data into a digestible way, very important. In fact, kind of to belabor this point more, but that's how I got started, and that's one of the reasons that I created a pig course, and that was really my first language, and that was yeah, we'll say that was my first MapReduce job that I ever wrote too. Was using Pig to be able to transform data, right? So to be able to take, like, we had a whole bunch of different log files that we were trying to parse, and if you're familiar with like just Apache log files, Windows log files, anything like that, you understand that it's semi-structured data, but whether I think most of them were all comma delimited, but you still had to transform that data and try to put it in a digestible fashion, so that we could chart and we could see, hey, tie specific users to, we had a lot of different use cases, but those are just some classic examples that you can do. You're just wondering about the version. I'm not really concerned about the Python version of Spark. Okay, cool. I don't know if you heard my example here too, but as I was answering Ben's question, came up with an idea just for a post or something like that you could do is if you were able to show some of the changes or some of the differences, and you had a blog or a YouTube channel, that would be good too for you to be able to go forward. Oh, glad I was able to answer your question. But that gives you an opportunity to just think of content. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that I want to do here in the next couple months is really just kind of tie back to a little more branding on the data engineering side. One, because I think it's good for your career at any point. I get an opportunity to talk to students and some of my old professors at my previous university, and that's one of the things that I really think is important. I wish I had done more. I wish when I was in college or even when I was in high school that I'd started at least creating a blog or something like that around the things that I was interested in. So you can hear it on the podcast that should be coming out here in the next couple of weeks, that interview that I just did. But that was one of the key points for me is, I started out kind of in like database and looking around that in college. Fast forward to when I got my first job, I was in web development, but wish when I'd been in college, at least I had kind of gone through, but even in high school, that would have been great. Like I had a C++ class that I didn't do very well in. So, but maybe I should have took Fortran first, but I think being able to go back, because I mean I did stuff, I did like a little bit of created your first HTML site. Probably this is showing my age, but it was on AOL. But just kind of going back and kind of building that brand. So maybe that's something we definitely need to do. If you're watching this live, tell me if you think that would be useful to kind of show how to build your brand and how to kind of start building your own website or YouTube channel and kind of how to think up content. Because sometimes I think one of the biggest points is not the technology. Like we're all watching this. It's fairly simple to set up a blog or to set up a YouTube channel. But what it really comes down to is like we're a little bit scared to put ourselves out there, or we think that we can't come up with content. There's a ton of content out there, right? So awesome. I got one upvote, so I'm excited about that. I think that's it for today. Unless there's any other questions, I will say I wanted to show again. Dogs who code. So if you heard something in the background, it is my 7-year-old's dog. sprinkles. So he likes to come out here on the session, and it also helps me because he is very energetic, and I also have a 14-month-old, and so sometimes they they clash. So on Saturdays when I come out here, I like to bring him just to kind of give my wife a break. So, well, thanks again. I appreciate it too, and thanks for watching in. So, sparkled YouTube. I don't know what that means. Make sure you tune in next week, and then also make sure you subscribe if you're watching this after the fact. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great weekend.